Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on mysterious and weird, true stories, from glitches to the paranormal. Case file number 680, written by Horse Lover 2529, A New Kind of White House. Excuse my French, but I'm so freaking confused. I was home every day. I notice things very well because I like to look around and observe nature, etc. Every single day I walk home. Been living on the same street for 10 years. Today I was walking and noticed a white house between two houses. One was brown on the right side of this new house, and one was yellow on the left. I honestly stared at the house for a few seconds, trying to remember if I had seen it before. There's a run-down house on our street, so I thought maybe they fixed it up. Nope. That house is like 5 to 6 houses down from this one. I noticed they were painting it, so I tried to remember if there was a house there at all. Nope. I was really freaked out. I've never seen the driveway, the cars, the people, any of it. Never seen this house. I could have sworn that this house wasn't here before. It's so unlikely that I didn't notice this before because I walk home every day. I'm so confused. Nothing else is off on my street, but from the 4 hours I was gone, I highly doubt someone built a whole house in that time and had time to paint it too. It's just impossible. I swear the yellow and brown houses were right next to each other. I think I'm losing my mind. I'm not on any drugs or intoxicated. I've never done drugs or alcohol in my entire life. Anyone had anything similar to this happen? It's on Google Maps. The more I look at it, the more I'm confused and realize I've never seen it. So I decided to ask my mother. She said it's been there all along, and I'm so confused. I swear it hasn't. I highly doubt I missed it since I walk home all the time from the same way. We're talking hundreds of times passing by. Case file number 681, written by Morticia Dumbledore, The Newspaper Anomaly. Like everywhere else in the world, we receive the daily newspaper. Well, daily. So I usually discard certain items in my kitchen after wrapping them up in old newspapers. Of course, I casually, by default, glance around at the articles printed on it before wrapping and throwing it away. These past few days, something weird happened. First day, I picked up an old newspaper, tore a random sheet, saw the page, and it had the recent Met Gala images on it. Very eye-catching. Blake Lively in a golden dress, Cara Delevingne covered in gold paint, Sarah Jessica Parker in the big, glamorous headgear. Not sure what those are called. Anyway, I crumpled it up around the trash and binned it. A couple of days later, I pulled out an old newspaper again, tear a random sheet out, and again, without doubt, it's the same sheet. Same pictures, same articles. I think to myself, maybe I'm mistaken, or maybe perhaps we got 2 sets of identical papers delivered by error. We order only 1 set of papers for the house. No one else orders an extra set. Well, with Google and all. I still glance at the date, just to be sure. It really is a date I saw from 2 days ago. I wrote it off as déjà vu. Now, almost a week to 10 days after this incident, which I'd completely forgotten about because of how trivial a coincidence it seemed, I pick up a random paper from the old pile of papers that I have collected over the past few days. I tear a random sheet again, and it's the same bloody sheet again. Same pictures, same article, same bloody date. Even if somehow an identical copy of the newspaper found its way into my house, how is the same sheet appearing thrice in a row? After me crumpling it up and discarding it multiple times. No one's messing with me for sure, because firstly, no one in my house has that kind of time or sense of humor. Secondly, there's no way to ensure what page from the stack I'd choose to tear off. Bonus file, written by SockTacoz. Talk about cruel and unusual punishment. I was in juvie as a kid pretty often. I ended up doing 4 months out of a 6-month sentence for possession with intent to distribute and probation violation, which was the longest I had gone to juvie. Ghost stories have been shared amongst the kids in there fairly often. The DOs, detention officers, would chime in time to time to tell theirs as well. Some were pretty hard to buy because it's juvenile and there isn't much to do besides tell stories, especially when talking through vents and toilets. One night, it was time for lockdown, bedtime. So we all turned in our stuff and headed in our cells. This time of night, someone is usually talking to you through a vent, so we'd stay up a little bit after lockdown, unless you were tired. Sometimes we'd mess around and even holler out the cell door saying insults to one another or egging on the DOs to come into the pod just to annoy them. This night, we thought someone was messing around. We hear what sounds like wailing, like someone pretending to be in pain, echoing through a cell door, and so a lot of the kids were yelling for them to shut the hell up and banging on the cell doors to get them to stop. A lot of threats were thrown out towards whoever was making the noise. Then the wailing sounded like someone was actually in pain. Guttural moaning and groaning, sounds you would hear from someone dying. Absolutely terrifying to hear. I started to get chills down my back because it sounded unreal. Finally, the DO came in and turned on all the lights and started calling out for whoever it was, seeing as someone sounded like they needed medical assistance. Then opened all of our doors and told us to step out so they could figure out who needs help. The sound kept going even after we all stepped out and lined up downstairs. The sound was coming from the second level, from a cell that no one was inside of. 2 DOs went up and opened the door, and the wailing kept going. The DOs radioed it in, saying there's nobody in the cell, and they were openly talking about how creeped out they were. And then a DO rushed down the stairs and told another DO that we all needed to leave the pod. We grabbed our blankets and moved to the pod across, all while this wailing was continuing. It was like something out of a horror movie. While we were waiting in the other pod for new cells to be assigned, the lights in the pod we were in had started to flicker. The look of horror on the kids' faces and the faces of the DOs sent goosebumps over my entire body as we were all witnessing this. One DO even told us we needed to pray, so we all grabbed hands and began praying. Even kids that hated each other were grabbing hands and praying. That's how wild this was. Eventually, we were all sent into our new cells and down for the night. The next morning, we were telling all the kids in the new pod about what happened, and they were shook. One DO had told us about him and the other DO with him that they had seen a black cloaked figure floating around in the pod around midnight, stopping at different cells. We never got moved back into that pod for the rest of my time there. I saw they ended up making it a rec room for the blue shirts, kids with more privileges because of good behavior. Case notes bonus file. Talk about cruel and unusual punishment. So this is making me think a lot about manifestations and stories I've narrated about that. One of them was someone manifesting just in their thoughts about a river increasing its flow, manifesting water. Another one about manifesting money. There's a lot of concept about that where our own thoughts can play into the reality of the world. Personally, I don't think anyone is actually creating physical matter from just their thoughts. That requires too much energy. However, I do think the collective pull, the weight from all the minds in the juvie pod could result in perhaps some kind of tether on a spirit that was in agony. So maybe they died in that cell, but they were out of phase and not really interacting with the real world. But then just everyone's presence and collective thoughts thinking about horror ghost stories and the like drew it in. It was in this reality and we heard its wailing, as you describe it, chilling and unreal. I can only imagine what that would be like, the horror. So that's what I would describe it as. I don't think this was a random haunting. I think it was everyone's thoughts focused on one topic that pulled it in. It's almost like a Ouija board, where everyone in the room is concentrated on this object, and through it, the active will of the desire for something to happen does happen. It's almost like people who are compulsively happy. They tend to draw other people that are happy in, and even make others happy themselves. It's sort of an indirect manifestation effect. And in a way, I think it's inspiring and motivating, don't you?